Her temperature was 107, and it kept on rising. It was 6 p.m., and I had spent the whole day trying to keep this patient alive. When her blood pressure dropped, our colleagues in anesthesia placed a central line for the pressors that we poured in. When her heart rate shot up and her EKG looked concerning, the cardiology fellows looked at her heart with an ultrasound and talked us through the next steps. Then her nurse was the one who noticed that the patient felt warm to touch, took her temperature, notified us of her wildly erratic vitals, all signs that she was descending into a cytokine storm. My interns, one of whom had joined our ranks from OB-GYN, immediately helped rally a crew of people to cover her in cooling blankets, to hunt down an ice bath, to push medications to bring her vital signs back to normal. And 8 sets of hands worked in a flurry, packing her in bag after bag of ice, all hands to turn her, to guard her lines and tubes. And we watched with desperate eyes as her temperature climbed, and then finally peaked at 108.8 before it broke, and she'd effervesced. COVID has brought us sickness and fear and situations I never thought I could see. But more remarkable, I think, than a temperature of 108 is the way this team of strangers came together. We have nurses and PAs and doctors who have traveled from around the country to be here, to come to help a city that has been brought to its knees by this pandemic. I have handled emergencies alongside people I've never met before. I've cried with nurses who don't know what I look like without a mask. And this is all in a time of profound isolation, a time when my patients can't have visitors, when I can't see my friends or family, a time when we all have to keep those we love at arm's length. This is an impossible time, and there are so many conflicting sentiments, courage and fear and excitement and sorrow. But what I keep coming back to is this one strange paradox, the ways this pandemic has brought us together and how it pushes us apart.
Welcome to a special episode of At the Bedside. We spoke to clinicians from across the country, and as Margot just described, we heard over and over how this pandemic has disconnected us from our families, from our patients, from each other. And yet, in different ways, this time has also brought a new sense of connection. You'll hear many voices, some of them new, and some familiar ones, such as hosts of other CoreIM segments. Some are internists, subspecialists, or anesthesiologists who are now working as critical care clinicians. Michael Shen, who usually creates the beautiful graphics for our episodes, masterfully mixed all the raw interviews and joins us today. He and Jafar will help unpack some of the layers of disconnection and connection we heard about.
Hey, it's Michael Shen. Over the past few weeks, I've been working on the wards in Manhattan, and at night, when I come home and listen to these interviews, I find that I'm not alone in feeling a deep sense of disconnection from my patients.
I've always taken pride in my 22-inch stethoscope, which is shorter than everybody else's, and I can hear everything that nobody can hear, but I became, very thoughtful about that. Maybe I need to go find my old stethoscope and not get so close.
What is it like to be in a room and one time a day to hear a knock at the door and then watch 2 people dressed in goggles that are fogged so you can't see their eyes, full masks, 2 pairs of gloves, like they're people from Mars, spend 3-4 minutes with you because they've got, 20 other people to see, but you don't know that.
I kind of found myself trying to ask patients questions about things like unrelated to why they were in the hospital, but still feeling this need to get out of their room.
They don't sit, they don't get near you, they don't touch you, they don't do an exam, and then they leave, and you feel like shit. And it's scary. I think it reminds me again how little I think I actually understand what it's like to be a patient.
I just felt distracted and disconnected from my patients, and I was very sad about that.
I think the one of the most shaming things is that you have trouble remembering. I think for me, talking to them about their families, ironically, half the time we're looking for sick contacts, but on the other hand, talking to them about their families is literally the only thing that I can remember that's different between folks, because the way they present in terms of the way they describe their symptoms sometimes gets so common. It kind of emphasizes this new barrier that I haven't really felt before.
There's just this loneliness that I think that is happening on both sides, for the patient because they can't have any visitors. For us, because we feel like we have to be responsible and just get down to business.
It's incredibly challenging. I think for me, that's one of the most challenging things about this.
If you ask me, what do I think is the thing that probably made the most difference in the broad perspective? I don't think it's any of my decisions about who gets started and what treatment. I think it's about the conversations that I've had with folks, to reassure the ones that are well and to prepare the ones that are going to get sick or that ended up getting sick. Who's your healthcare proxy? What would you want, in this scenario, et cetera, et cetera.
So much of the current national drama has focused on the front lines, but a lot of what we heard when we were talking to people had more to do with what happens when we leave the front lines and go home to our friends and family. Or to be more specific, what parts of the front lines come home with us? We expose ourselves, our bodies, but then we take these bodies back around those we love. This menacing fear of contagion following us. Even the simple act of touch has been transformed into something both dangerous and treasured, condemned, but still mourned.
I think we're all scared of spreading it to people we love, because that feels like something that we're responsible for, even if it is the virus that causes it.
One of the most difficult things for me so far has been not touching and hugging and kissing my family the way that I normally would.
Knowing full well that I could become sick and have to quarantine myself from my family, I started at nighttime holding my daughters in bed, just knowing that there may be a time, and it may be very soon, where I'm not going to be able to do that at all.
There is something lost in people not being able to touch each other in the same way. And I'm not even talking about, the intimate things that people think about between partners. I'm thinking just about wrapping my arms around my son while we watch TV, or hearing about his day, nose to nose, in the bed before he goes to sleep and stuff like that. That has been very, very difficult for me.
I'd like to think as a doctor, I'm going to help the person I see. But with COVID, there's this invisible air of contagion that just follows me wherever I go. So the next person I see, am I going to hurt them or help them? My wife and I dealt with this firsthand.
The first inkling that things were going to change pretty quickly was when my nanny, who's Italian, her parents are still in Italy, quit without much notice. She obviously acknowledges that both my husband and I are physicians, and that we are, as healthcare workers, at extremely high risk. She just said, look, I don't feel safe being here. Her boyfriend's immunocompromised. She obviously had heard from her parents, who had been quarantined in Italy, how bad this could get.
Now, on the flip side, what's beautiful about it is that my husband, who I normally enjoy talking to a lot anyway, we just have much deeper conversations. I feel like I know a lot more about what he does at work, and he knows a lot more about what I do at work.
I have grandparents in another country, and I've, in the last week and a half, I've called them 4 times.
My mom moved out here to Los Angeles several weeks before this pandemic became a reality for all of us. So the second my nanny quit with no notice, I told my mom that it's time to step up, and now I talk to her every single day. I see her most days. Yeah, I have lived apart from her for 20 years of my life, and all of a sudden, she's a critical part of it.
Even while we're finding this new connection with friends and family, we're also disconnected from a part of ourselves that's used to security. I lost all that mental security that comes from feeling competent in a situation, confident about the future, and comfortable in my routines and schedules. But more than that, I felt disconnected from my physical security, genuinely questioning if I'll survive this pandemic.
I definitely had a moment where this became very real. Not all the patients are elderly. I mean, there are patients who are my age or younger
You accept a certain level of risk that comes with the profession, but typically like that level of risk I think is met with like good preparation. But with COVID, I think like we know so little about it. It's so hard to tell if people are symptomatic or not.
It's been about kind of trying to confront and understand those fears so that way they don't just kind of sit in the back of your brain unacknowledged. I think it's important to kind of, when you're home, take a mental inventory of that fear, even if it doesn't make any sense, to allow that to kind of surface so that way you can actually address it, because there is a huge emotional pull with taking care of this disease that I have not seen before. There's a higher rate of burnout that I haven't seen before. And I think this disease, more than anything, really forces us to relinquish some of the things that we used to pretend we could control.
It always, to me, seemed like kind of a faraway discussion, like a total hypothetical, but, you know, seeing this actually happen in front of me really made me realize, like, I have to make this concrete and I have to make this workable, not, you know, someday, but actually now. I mean, we just had the conversations we haven't had before, like who is going to care for our two infant daughters if something happens to both of us? We hadn't had that discussion before.
It was hard to talk about, but we got it into writing. We both filled out advance directives and talked about what it would mean to be stripped of our health, to be stripped of our dignity. We talked about life support, feeding tubes, brain injury, and what it would mean to live without each other. I had my mother-in-law act as a witness, and with no one else around, I had to bring it to one of my attendings to be a second witness. Both signed it. Neither said a word about it.
While we wrestle with all the uncertainty, disconnected from the security that we're so used to, one thing that surfaced over and over again is how we're connected in ways we haven't been before. There's a new kind of shared ethos. We have, in a sense, found anchors in each other.
Almost existentially, you do feel more connected with the rest of the world. Just connection not only with everyone else around the world who right now is kind of suffering in similar ways, but also the people who in the past have suffered. It makes me think about the people who survived World War II, and that was very different and much more terrible in a lot of ways, but it just makes me feel a connection with the many, many human beings who have had to suffer these kinds of challenging times and scary times, which is oddly comforting.
The emotional burden of this hits us all. Now more than ever, it's important to recognize and empathize with people around you.
It's not possible for a clinician to be effective in isolation. The past week has made me so acutely aware of how dependent my work is on the system. Just like basic things, like going to see a patient and, is there going to be PPE there, and has someone put them on the appropriate precautions? I've never been so acutely aware of how many other people are necessary for me to do my job. My idealization of the clinician as a sort of 19th century romantic, independent soul taking care of people has just really crashed. I think I have newfound respect for the integrity of systems and the people who manage them.
I think one of the most positive things that I've seen is just the adaptability of people to reorganize ourselves, to work together, to answer the call.
An important part of feeling fulfilled in your job is feeling like the work you're doing is meaningful, that it counts in some way. And quite frankly, when you do work like that, it doesn't matter if it's tiring, if it carries some amount of risk. Certainly makes me feel like I'm part of something bigger.
Interestingly, in the healthcare role, we get to maintain a little bit of a sense of normalcy in a way that other people can't, which is weird to say because nothing really feels normal right now. But I still get up in the morning at the same time. I come into work. I see the same colleagues, which is a privilege I think that a lot of people don't have. So in that sense, there is still tangible connection.
Well, I do have two colleagues in anesthesia who are also, young women who are at the beginning of our careers, and we've kind of banded together in the midst of all of this, both to information share, but it's also definitely sprinkled with a lot of gallows humor and having people to either just laugh at the ridiculousness of it all or just laugh at how crazy our lives are right now has been definitely a light in all of this. And I was actually thinking the other day how on the other side of this pandemic, when we eventually get there, how much of a bonding experience this really is.
I'd always just heard about when something traumatic happens that people have post-traumatic stress disorder, that something traumatic happens and what you can expect is for it to disrupt your ability to do anything and for it to set you back. I hadn't really ever heard of this idea of post-traumatic growth. We've all, if we sit and close our eyes and think about people, famous people, not famous people, people we know who've had something happen that you think like that should have taken them out. That should have been the end for them. But yet they kept going, and not just going, they somehow emerged out of it better, stronger, more able, more agile. I mean, I want to believe that healthcare and healthcare providers and medical educators will come out of this with a post-traumatic growth. And I don't know if that's really like an official term or anything, but I do think it's real. And I have found some solace in that idea. And yes, our mental health professionals will be ready and willing to support our post-traumatic stress, but also to fan the flame of our post-traumatic growth, because I think that is something that can happen and will happen if we look for it.
We've been in this for more than a month now, which is long enough to know how hard this pandemic will be to overcome, but not long enough to know how much longer we'll have to keep this pace up. I haven't seen anyone but my coworkers and my partner in what feels like forever. And it seems kind of selfish to say this when their problem's so much bigger than me, but I miss being close to people, being close to my patients. But despite what we're going through, hectic hospital, airways being called overhead every half hour, the deaths, the disruption of our lives outside the hospital, despite all that, there is still a palpable atmosphere of hope. We're starting to see signs that this pandemic might not be as bad as it could have been. We haven't run out of ventilators, haven't been matching the worst case scenarios that we'd been running in our heads. And that's because of the way people came together. People got together to find us the masks and PPE we needed to care for our patients safely. Hospitals that had empty beds are opening them to hospitals that have become overwhelmed. People stayed home, and we're starting to see the cases level off. We're starting to see the flattening of the curve that we were all so desperately hoping for. This pandemic has taught me a lot. It's still teaching me every day, but one of the most enduring lessons has been seeing just how interconnected we are. We're connected to each other in the hospital, to the people who lean out their windows and applaud at 7 p.m. every night, to the country as a whole and the international community, all connected through this shared struggle. And yet we can't come close to each other in the ways that we used to, because connecting in that way could spread this disease further. And our systems, so reliant on a physical proximity that I had taken for granted, have started to fall apart in this time of social distancing. The fracture lines are running through our restaurants, our schools, our farms, our country, all of the international supply chains that we rely on. Our interconnectedness can bring us together. Our interconnectedness can bring us harm. And it's left me with a question, which I want to leave with you. Where do we go from here?
Support for this podcast and the following message come from CoreIM. CoreIM provides wealth management services centered around you. They focus on exceeding your expectations and simplifying your life. CoreIM has been helping high achievers just like you enjoy their lives more fully, preserve their wealth, and provide for the people, causes, and communities they care about. As one of the largest integrated fee-only registered investment advisors in the U.S., CoreIM has deeply experienced teams in 23 strategic locations. CoreIM has extensive knowledge spanning the full spectrum of planning, investing, lending, and money management disciplines. Leverage CoreIM's exclusive network of experts to craft custom solutions designed to help you reach your financial goals, no matter how complex they may be. Real wealth requires real solutions. For more information, connect with a wealth advisor today at CoreIM.com. That's CoreInt.com. CoreInt.com.
You know how to book flights and hotels. All you're missing is a tool to plan the travel experiences you'll have once you arrive. That's why you need Viator. Book guided tours, activities, excursions, and more in one place to make your trip truly unforgettable. Viator has over 300,000 travel experiences to choose from. Everything from simple tours to extreme adventures, and all the niche, interesting stuff in between. So you can plan something that everyone you're traveling with will enjoy. Real traveler reviews give the inside scoop from people who've already been on the experiences you're considering. So you can plan with confidence. Free cancellation helps you plan for the unexpected. And 24/7 customer support means you can travel worry-free. Download the Viator app now and use code Viator10 for 10% off your first booking in the app. Find travel experiences for you. Do more with Viator.